Hello there, dear friend. I'm truly grateful you're watching this video, and if you hit that subscribe button, well, that would brighten my day even more. Let's dive in. The morning she said she needed some space, he didn't flinch. The mug in Jack Weston's hand stayed steady, the warmth still seeping through his fingers. He didn't argue, didn't beg. The man who had built homes for others and quietly carried his own family like beams under a roof stood still and made a decision that would redraw the structure of their entire life together. Claire Weston had always known comfort. She preferred the chime of wine glasses, the soft flicker of scented candles, and the quiet authority that came with taste and control. For years, Jack had kept their life turning smoothly, consistently, never expecting gratitude. But on that morning, Claire didn't just ask for breathing room, she offered him liberation cloaked as distance. And Jack, he took her at her word. While she planned yoga escapes and rekindled old connections under the banner of self-growth, Jack began a quiet erasure of himself. No drama, no shouting, just a slow fade, so subtle it was like the house was sighing in relief. When Claire finally noticed that his recliner had vanished, Jack was already hundreds of miles away. He had adopted a new name, Joseph Harper, and settled into a modest rental near Quiet Lake. His digital life was wiped, finances restructured. Legal power transferred not to Claire but to the daughter-in-law she once dismissed as nothing more than a Pinterest enthusiast. Jack left with just a duffel bag, digital scans of precious memories, and the unshakable resolve of a man who had been quietly drafting his escape plan the same way he used to design homes, methodically and without emotion. Claire believed it was a performance. She imagined him moping on a lakeside bench, waiting for her to come around. But while she held wine nights with influencer friends and chatted up men named Mike who had conveniently moved into the neighborhood, the silence from Jack's end grew deafening. Then came the boutique incident. Her card was declined. Once, twice, 3 times. The item, a flamingo-shaped candle holder. An email arrived. Please route all inquiries through legal representation. Jay, she laughed it off in front of her friends. But later, alone, the tears came when she opened her banking app and saw just $217 in the account, and none of it his. It was her leftover earnings from an old copywriting gig she hadn't thought about in years. But the true consequence wasn't loud or cruel. It was total absence. Jack had surgically extracted himself from the life she once managed with curated quotes and tight-lipped smiles, and now she didn't even know who held the reins. Claire had always mistaken silence for surrender. As long as Jack didn't argue, she assumed he was still hers, her backup plan, her loyal spouse. But what she never grasped was that Jack had learned how to walk away long before he physically left. He hadn't vanished. He'd recalculated. In a rented house beside a shimmering Kentucky lake, Jack started living again. He fixed leaking faucets with the same hands that had once held hers in the turbulence of their honeymoon. He barbecued with their grandson Evan and taught him how to clean a fish. For the first time in years, he laughed, really laughed. And as Claire posted cryptic updates about finding herself, Jack was quietly rewriting what his life meant. Back at the house they once shared, Claire spun her own narrative. Tuesday wine nights turned into emotional group chats with buzzwords. We grew apart, she'd say. Sharon and Denise would nod as if she'd said something profound. But the house remembered. The tile Jack had laid. The patio he built, brick by brick. Every surface whispered of his absence. Meanwhile, Jack sat across from a meticulous, soft-spoken lawyer in town. Nothing extravagant, just crisp, decisive paperwork. The house, the vacation property, their savings, all legally locked inside a trust. Claire couldn't touch a cent. Elise, the same woman Claire once called ordinary with delusions of purpose, now held power of attorney. If Jack ended up in a hospital bed, Elise would decide who stood by his side. Claire remained oblivious. until her card stopped working, her calls went unanswered, and the hospital phoned about her mother's stroke. That's when panic bloomed. She tried calling Josh, straight to voicemail, again and again. Finally, on the 7th try, someone picked up. Not Jack, not Josh, Elise. Claire's voice cracked. "Please, I need to speak with Jack. It's about my mom. It's urgent. It's family." There was a pause. Elise answered, calm and cool. "Jack requested no contact," Claire pleaded. "He'll want to know. Please." "I'll tell him," Elise replied, "if he chooses to respond." Click. It wasn't rejection. It was substitution. At the hospital, when Claire finally saw Josh, he was sitting beside her mother's bed reading quietly. When she entered, he didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her. "You asked for space," he said. She whispered, "Not from you. I just needed time. Things were complicated." "And you had that," he replied. She asked if Jack would come. Josh calmly pulled out his phone and pressed play. Claire's own voice poured from the speaker. "Jack, I didn't mean to push you away." The message she had left weeks ago. Jack's voice followed. "Claire, you left. I didn't chase. I built. No bitterness, just closure." Her legs nearly gave out. She had spent months building the illusion of emotional rebirth. Jack had spent that same time building something real, something without her. The hospital smelled like bleach, like finality. Claire sat by her unconscious mother, but it wasn't her mother's shallow breathing that hollowed her out. It was Jack's message, echoing in her mind. "You left. I didn't chase. I built. Not bitter, just intentional." Josh offered no comfort, no touch, no eye contact. His quiet presence, like Jack's absence, carried its own message. Claire blinked through the fluorescent brightness, her eyes swimming, not with performative tears, but with the terrible clarity that comes when you finally understand. No one is coming. Not her son, not her husband, not even the version of herself she once believed in. When she got back home, the house didn't feel like hers anymore. Every hallway felt unfamiliar. The creaks in the floor had changed pitch. Even the fridge door opened differently, as if the house itself had chosen a side. Late that night, while pacing the kitchen, her heels clicking against tiles Jack had laid, she found an envelope resting by the front door. Plain, white, padded. Her name printed in bold block letters. She thought it might be something trivial. Skincare products, or maybe a self-help course she forgot she'd ordered. But as soon as she held it, her hands began to tremble. The weight wasn't in the package. It was in the intent. She opened it with slow, uncertain fingers. Inside were 3 things: a filed and finalized trust amendment. Her name, surgically removed from every asset she once assumed was hers by right. The home, the beach property, the savings, all reassigned, all gone. And then a transcript, cold, detached, word for word. Her own desperate voicemail sent weeks earlier, every plea, every crack in her voice, typed out in Times New Roman, with perfect punctuation, no emotion, only evidence, a photo, a single 5/7 print, crisp, saturated, undeniable. Jack stood barefoot at the edge of a calm lake. His khakis were rolled to mid-calf, one hand resting gently on the shoulder of their grandson. The boy held up a fish, beaming like he'd found buried treasure. Jack's smile was real, unforced, a quiet joy that didn't lie. His ring finger was bare. But the boy's sweatshirt, that worn, oversized one Claire used to sleep in, hung off his small frame. She hadn't held him in weeks. It was too large, too soft, and too painfully familiar. A sticky note clung to the corner of the image. The writing was neat, deliberate. "We'll keep him safe. Elise." Claire dropped the picture like it scalded her. Her hands trembled. Her eyes froze on the table. Her jaw locked. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, silence filled the space. Her silence. Jack's silence, Elise's silence, and underneath all of it, the deafening echo of consequence. That night, sleep never came. She curled up on the couch, the one Jack had always disliked, the one she chose because it photographed well. Now it felt like granite, cold, decorative, empty, like the filtered version of herself she had broadcast to the world. As morning broke, she called Jack, ring after ring, straight to voicemail. She tried again, and once more. At last, the line connected. Hello? It was a child's voice, clear, cheerful. Claire froze. Evan, she breathed. Grandpa said you're not supposed to call anymore. Click. No anger, no resentment, just a child obeying the rules. His words shattered the final illusion Claire clung to. She realized then, it was never about reclaiming Jack. It was about resisting the erasure. But she was already gone. Her hands shook around the phone. Her gaze returned to the photo, Jack and Evan, barefoot in sunlight, and something twisted inside her. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She hadn't reached out to Evan in over a month. While Jack taught him to fish and rediscover joy, she had been sipping wine, posting platitudes about healing, retreating into solitude she had mistaken for resilience. She used to say Jack was too quiet, too mild, but now she understood. His quiet was never emptiness. It was intention, awareness, readiness. He hadn't abandoned her. He had outgrown her. And no reflection, no quote, no highlight reel could soften that truth. The walls still bore their familiar eggshell hue. The couch sat where it always had. The curtains danced with the same breeze. But everything inside felt hollow, as though the spirit of the house had been carried away, leaving only a facade. Claire sat at the dining table, phone in hand like it might yield a confession. She reread the transcript of the voicemail she had left in desperation. Seeing it typed out was worse than hearing it. It wasn't a plea anymore. It was a record, her unraveling documented in plain text. 2 days after the photo arrived, she reached out to Jack's sister. No reply. Then she tried an old friend they shared. Still nothing. As a last attempt, she sent an email. Subject line: Please, just 5 minutes. It bounced back immediately. A cold auto reply: Mr. Harper is no longer at this address. But that wasn't the sharpest blow. The real ache came from the person now standing between her and what once belonged to her. Elise. The woman Claire had dismissed with barely a thought. Her cheap shoes, her bland tease, her clumsy attempts at conversation during holidays. Now Elise was the gatekeeper of Jack's well-being, of the trust, of the family group chats Claire hadn't seen in weeks. When Claire finally got her on the phone, Elise didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She simply drew a line and held it. No accusations, no history thrown back in her face, just firm, quiet boundaries. And somehow, that stung even more. She thought again of the note. We'll keep him safe. Elise. Not I. We. The message was unmistakable now. Jack hadn't escaped into someone new. He had constructed something steadier with people who stayed, with Elise, with Josh, with Evan. A week later, a second envelope arrived. Plain, no sender listed. Inside were 3 documents, a formal statement relinquishing her status as Jack's spouse. It wasn't a divorce. It was more resolute than that. A clean, silent deletion. Her name removed, her authority revoked, the medical proxy reassigned. The line once labeled spouse now bore a name that etched itself into Claire's memory. Elise Monroe Weston. A note came with it. No greeting, no warmth. Just, Claire, I didn't disappear. I recalculated. Jay. The paper fell from her hand. Her heart thudded in her chest. Recalculated. The word echoed inside her like a verdict. This wasn't mourning. This was irrelevance. She called again. The line didn't even ring. A message played instead. You've been blocked. From his phone, from his life, from the man she thought would always be within reach. She wandered barefoot through the kitchen. Jack had laid those tiles for her 2 decades ago. She used to complain it was always cold. Now, it felt glacial. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. If this is Claire, please direct all further communication through legal counsel. This number is no longer in use for personal contact. No sign-off, no sentiment, just finality. She sank to the floor, phone clutched to her chest like it could still make things right. But it couldn't. Jack wasn't adrift. He wasn't shattered. He was simply gone. And he had gone with intention. The weeks crawled by like shadows across empty rooms. The house remained still, hollow. Claire was the only one left, and even she felt like a ghost. Her social media fell silent. No more quotes, no more wine-fueled reflections, no more curated updates. Sharon stopped answering. Denise, too. Even Mike, who was just a friend, had gone quiet. Claire wasn't just alone. She was disconnected from everything that once defined her. One afternoon, while folding the throw Jack used to nap under, she discovered a faded sticky note wedged between the cushions. His handwriting, "Pick up light bulbs. Love you." She stared at it until her eyes blurred, then held it close to her chest and sobbed, not with restraint, but with a rawness that tore something loose. She hadn't cried like that at her mother's funeral. This wasn't the grief of death. It was the grief of being left behind by the living, and that grief cut deeper. That evening the doorbell rang. Evan stood on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, a paper folded in his hand. "Grandpa said I can stay for 1 hour," he said politely but coolly. Claire blinked. "He let you come by yourself?" Evan shook his head. "Elise drove. She's outside." Claire longed to pull him into her arms, ask every question building in her chest, about Jack, about whether he missed her, whether she still lived in his stories. But she resisted. Instead, she welcomed him in, made cocoa, and gently asked, "Are you still playing violin?" Evan shrugged. "Not really." That was all. "Grandpa's teaching me how to build birdhouses," Evan said softly, a faint smile touching his lips. Claire mirrored it, though hers barely held. "He used to make everything," she murmured. "He still does," Evan replied. "Just somewhere else now." He reached into his jacket and handed her a folded sheet. She opened it with care. Crayon marks stretched across ruled paper. A home, trees, a lake, and a small child standing next to a man holding a toolbox. At the bottom, in wobbly, blocky handwriting, "Me and Grandpa's new house." It radiated calm, safety. There was no sign of his grandmother, no floral patterns, no wine glasses, no decorative quotes in pretty frames. Just the boy and his grandfather. Just quiet. Evan drained the last of his cocoa, murmured a quiet thanks, and stepped outside. Claire stayed at the threshold, watching. Elise emerged from the car and wrapped Evan in a hug. She didn't look Claire's way, not because of indifference, but because she didn't need to. The message was already written in the way she was there. Elise had become the steady one, not through winning, but through simply staying. Claire pulled the door closed behind her. The silence it left was not soothing. It was total. 2 days passed. Then the final package came. This time she didn't hesitate. She ripped it open and found a brief note and a small USB stick inside. "You deserve the ending, not in anger, in understanding. Jay." She plugged it in. A video loaded. Jack stood at a podium by the lakeside, Evan nearby, Josh further back. Elise was behind the camera. Jack began, "To new beginnings, not born from resentment but from truth. To those who survive the storm, and those who choose to rebuild afterward. I didn't leave in fury," he went on. "I left because peace needed a different address." Then he smiled. Claire watched in silence, her jaw set, her breathing shallow. It hadn't been about someone else. He hadn't left for another woman. He left to become a new version of himself, a man surrounded by people who stayed. Claire had never betrayed him with infidelity, but she had in other ways, with distance, with pride, with the unspoken belief that Jack would always be there, ready to be needed again. He hadn't waited. He had moved forward. Their story had reached its final chapter. No edits, no sequels. "This is where it ends for us," he said. "Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out the other stories on our channel. Until next time, my friend.